Okay, so today I would like to cover on the application areas of the data science and also on data science project. How can we classify it is a data science project, and then a typical job scope of a data scientist, and also the required knowledge that is needed for us to work as a data scientist or any job that is related to data science. And the last part, I will talk about the stages in the data science project. So basically, today I will just cover on the generic terms, but also I will relate on my past experience and how it's actually different from the theoretical to the practical. So, so I'm going to discuss about that. So today, as you can see, right, the importance of the data science in today's world basically is all about the crisis management. This is an example of COVID-19 because it is a very hot issue nowadays, which is about how the situation is analyzed and the mitigation plans that can be taken to overcome the situation. And then it's also covered on the sales and marketing, health, diagnostic, cancer, virus, and etc. And then also can be as a recommendation on what kind of treatments that can be done. Okay, and then for the politics, also on the sentiment analysis, but also it can be used in many other things, also which we can see the strength of a party in the politics. So this is a very important tools for data science. And then for agriculture, logistics, tourism, education, sports, social media, and many, many more. So there are a lot actually things or applications that can be related to data science, and you can take all this application as part of your portfolio, and this can become your background for your next future planning of data science. Okay, so how can a project can be classified as a data science project? So usually, of course, it involves data, all right, and you need to produce insights or recommendation. So basically, we have data, all right, and then we have process, and then we need to do some part of storage, for example, data lake, and then we need to produce the information. Okay, so this is the generic process of the data science project. So if we look at the typical job scope of a data scientist, usually they need to perform statistical analysis, machine learning, pattern recognition, data visualization. So this is actually most of the jobs that need to be done by data scientists. But in real world, the things that we need to look into is actually the data. Okay, the availability of the data. So that availability of data is considered as crucial because sometimes data comes from different parties, different sources, and it is not easy to get. So there's a lot of bureaucracy involved, and then cost. So this could be a problem. Okay, so another job scope of data scientists is to help to drive the sales and solutions. So basically, in a company, if they wants to hire you as a data scientist, they expect you to drive the sales of the business, and also to come up with a solution on how to improve the sales or business. So let's say, for example, if we work in Tesco, for example, so how can we arrange the products in order to get people to buy more of the products, and how can we deliver, how can we put discounts or any strategy in order to boost the sales of the product. So this is actually very important in the company. And then another part that is important, it is actually to coordinate research and analytic activities. So basically, as a data scientist, although we do a lot theoretically in the statistical analysis, machine learning, pattern recognition, and whatever, but mostly it is all about the coordination of the research and the activity. So basically, we need to identify the stages that need to be involved depending on the type of project that we are engaging. So it depends on your stakeholders, and also you have to identify the processes that is needed, the process that are needed for you to actually work around, and how can you produce the analytics. Okay, just like I mentioned, the data scientists also need to develop the methodology and processes of a project. So of course, it must be in a form of timeline. And we also need to coordinate and collaborate with other business units for long-term data platform. Okay, so basically, data scientists, they have two phases. Okay, they have two phases of doing the analysis. Firstly is about getting the data and then start to do the preliminary process. But at the same time, the data also, especially on sensor data or streaming data, is running. So we need to come up an idea how can we do analysis on the streaming data or real-time data. So real-time data is something that is very, very crucial also, because it can actually influence the input and output of the system, and also the accuracy. So that's why we have to come up with a plan of how long-term data platform can be actually developed. So as part of Mr. Hafiz said just now, it is the best if we can apply third-party tools instead of install on the premise, because the third-party tools, it is more streamlined and it's easy to be executed. For example, like AWS or Google Cloud Platform or anything. Okay, and then another job scope of data scientists is actually to identify the available data sources and automate data collection process. So basically, if given a project, okay, you have to split down to different types of problem statements. So based on the problem statements, okay, this one has just been discussed by Ms. Nurul about the building block. Which is about the problem statement. So from the problem statement, you have to drill down what kind of data sources can be used for that particular problem statement. And then at the same time, you have to plan how to automate the data collection process in order to support on the long-term data platform. And then at the same time, we have to propose solutions, identify opportunities and strategies to business challenges. So basically, it's not just process data. Actually, we have to come up with. That's why we need to come up with ideas. Okay, we have to come up with ideas, solutions, or any opportunities that can actually give profit to the organization. So that's why if you have been experienced going for an interview as a data scientist, the interviewer will ask you about a specific problem, and then how can you actually improve the profit of the company, and also how can you come up with a solution. How can you come up with a solution in order to improve their sales, profits, and also decrease the cost that's been borne by the organization. So basically, when you go for an interview, they ask very less on the methods, on the machine learning, pattern recognition, or whatsoever, but they will ask more towards how can you actually strategize to come up with decisions. Yeah, so this is something that you have to actually read a lot also in order to produce this kind of thoughts. Okay, so now we go to the typical knowledge required if you want to be as a data scientist or data analyst or anyone that is related to data science project. So basically, firstly, of course, you need to have a programming knowledge, which is on Python, R, Java, SQL, etc. It can be one of them, but the most important thing is you must be able to learn throughout the process. Okay, you must be able to learn throughout the process, because sometimes from the given project, they give you like 1 year, so you have to know how to split the time when it is the time for you to learn for each of the programming language. And sometimes you are not able to learn all of it. right? Because there are a lot of libraries, building blocks that you need to learn. Okay, and then you must also be introduced to certain part of the business intelligence tools, like Tableau, Power BI, ClickSense, Data Studio, and etc. So this actually can be as your foundation of the analysis. So for you students, you have learned about the Tableau and also Power BI. I think it's good. It's a good foundation for you. As long as you are actually being exposed to this kind of data analysis job. Okay, and then we also need to have the analytical skill. Okay, this is the most important part that we need to actually grasp this kind of knowledge. For example, the critical thinking, data analysis, reporting, and etc. So this is actually, it consists of categories that includes of logical reasoning, critical thinking, communication, research, data analysis, reporting, data mining, and forecasting. So basically, it's all about telling a story. So this one you have to be creative. Okay, you have to try to think outside of the box. How can you actually tell something to people so that people they can understand? And of course, when we are dealing with the policymakers, so you have to come up with a strong reason. How can you actually influence, or how can you give directions so that policymakers can easily come up with a solution? Okay, and then of course, another thing is we need to know the mathematical skills, basics like statistics, algebra, or calculus. But of course, the basic one is always on the statistics. Okay, the basic one is always statistics. Okay, because sometimes most of the job can be done by doing statistics. But of course, when it comes to prediction, then machine learning can come into the picture. Okay, next skills that we need to have is problem solving skills. Okay, problem solving skills. So that means in any way we have to be creative, or we have to think outside of the box. How can we solve a problem given by the user or organization? And then we also need to have at least a basic idea of the machine learning that include supervised, unsupervised, or reinforcement learning or algorithms. And if you jump into deep learning also, it is okay, but still in Malaysia or in most of the research, if we can come up with a good data enrichment, we no need to care so much about the deep learning. But it is good actually exposure. It is a good exposure to learn on the deep learning. Okay, another thing that we have to look into is actually the big data tools. So for example, that we have Hadoop, Spark, and then we also need to actually familiarize with Hive, Apache Cassandra, NoSQL, which is the MongoDB, and then we also need to know the Elasticsearch and many other tools. So basically, this process or these tools we can learn along the way. It doesn't mean that you have to learn it now, okay? But of course, you have to start somewhere. So the best way it is to learn Hadoop, okay, as the first phase, because that is considered as the foundation. So if you know about Hadoop, you can know the rest. But nowadays, even you can also learn about the Cassandra as part of the knowledge, and also the Elasticsearch. Okay, so now we go to the next part, which is the stages. Okay, so basically when we engage to a project, we need to define the stage, as I mentioned. So basically, we have in a team, okay, in a data science team, we have just mentioned by Mr. Rafiez and also Ms. Nurul. Actually, in data science project, we don't work alone. So we are in a team. So it comprises of project manager, data engineer, business analyst, system analyst, and then developer, infrastructure developer. So these are the few people that are also actually working with us. But these people, they will actually work based on us. Okay, so that means as a data scientist, you have to come up with the stage. You have to come up with the stage. So then all these teams will follow. Okay, all these people, they will follow. How are you going to work around with this project? So basically, we start with the stage. Okay, so usually it's about the business understanding. So it is very, very important for us to know what project that we are doing. Okay, and then we go to the data collection, and then data exploration, and then data strengthening. So that means it's the process of data enrichment by when you find features or whatsoever, and then we create model, and then we perform report, and then we create data platform. So basically, this is actually a cycle process. This is a cycle process that you need to, it can be repeated all over again. Because why? Because sometimes when you accomplish certain part, you go to the next stage, and then the next stage cannot be done because of the previous part is not correctly done. So you have to reverse. Okay. So that's how the agile works. Okay. So that means there's some kind of cycle that we need to look into in order to make these things work. Okay, so firstly, we go to the business understanding. So it is an important steps of how the business or activity works surrounding the data. So basically, if you are involved in the data science project, firstly, you have to know how the business or activity works, okay, surrounding the data. So that means we have a data, so how the business works based on that particular data. So let's say, for example, if let's say we are talking about the business data, so what kind of data that is involved in that particular business data? So let's say it's about sales. So how is it being processed? Is it by time or is it by product? So we have to identify what kind of process that we need to know, okay, especially in the business. Okay, and then we have to meet with the stakeholders. Okay, this is where it can be done by joining the talk or workshop. Okay, why the reason of meeting the stakeholders is because we need to dig as many information as possible related to the business process, and this also involve with the data. Okay, we need to know what kind of data that can be used in order to come up with an insights or come up with the information to the policymakers. Because sometimes we know we have a project, we have a problem, but we are not sure what kind of data that can be used. Okay, so this is actually the things that can be taken in order to enhance our project, data science project. Okay, we also need to know, we need to understand how the decision is made by the policymakers. Okay, so we need to understand, as we are developing a data science project, a big data project, we need to know previously how the decision is made. Okay, we need to know how the decision is made before this. Okay, and this can give us a picture of a glance of how we going to automate that in order to produce a decision through our system. Okay, of course, the next thing is to identify the goal. Okay, so that means after we get the understanding, so we need to identify the goal. So that means that we need to visualize what kind of output that can be produced from our system or BDA system. Okay, so this time we need to come up with a timeline, okay, which is in the project management perspective. And also we need to come up with a KPI, which is the key performance indicator for each of that particular timeline or process. So this KPI, for example, we need to validate with the user. So that means that for each of the KPI that we have listed, we have to make sure that the user is agree to what they want. Okay, because this project usually when what you do is always we want to satisfy what the user wants. Okay, and sometimes we know that users sometimes they always change their mind along the way, but as long as you follow what they want, okay, and you can give what they want, they will be very happy. Okay, because if the user is not happy, so it's considered as your BDA system or BDA project can become fail. Okay, The next phase, it is to perform data collection. So data, it can be collected from various sources. So basically, it can be from flat file, okay? It can be from database. It can be from anywhere. So there are various sources that we have to look into, okay? And usually, for data collection, usually data engineer will assist us on how to collect the data and perform ETL. Okay, so basically, after we get all the data, we need to know what, from database, we need to know at least the certain knowledge about the MySQL, PostgreSQL, Oracle, MongoDB, and etc. So this, we need to know what kind of data, if let's say involving database, so we need to know what kind of database that is being using, and we need to know how the manipulation can be done. Okay, and then web scraping also is a very popular tool which is used to extract data from websites. So how it is done, this access is to access the World Wide Web using HTTP or browser. So usually nowadays we can use the tools. For example, we have a Beautiful Soup, Web Scraper IO, and or you can also build your own web scraper. Okay, next is using the web API. So this one is actually by performing a special connection to the server using certain protocols to extract data. So example, that the one that is used in Facebook or Twitter. So for sentiment analysis, we can use web API in order to connect to the data to extract the information as part per what we need. And next data collection is about the CSV or Excel. So this is the traditional way of data. Okay, so this one, I think all of you has been using this. And also data collection comes from the Hadoop or Spark, from the big data architecture, yeah? Okay, and then next thing is about the data exploration and cleansing. Okay, so this is actually one of the most crucial phase. You can ask any people that is related to data science, especially data scientists, data engineer, data analyst. Data exploration and cleansing is one of the most crucial phase. Because why? Because it can take up to 80% of the time. Okay, it can take up to 80% of the time because this data exploration and data collection, it works side by side. Okay, it works side by side. So that means that the moment that you take the data, okay, the moment that you take the data, you have to actually explore. And then if let's say that the data is not good enough, so you have to collect again. Okay, so explore. And then this process, it can take a lot of time. So this is the thing. Okay, as a data scientist or data analyst, okay, we need to understand the variables involved in that particular data. So it can be in the form of table. So we need to know what kind of variables that is involved. And if it is in map, okay, or is it in the time series database, we need to know what kind of variables that is involved, and then how can we actually do the extraction of it. Okay, and then we also need to investigate how good is the data. Okay, so this is actually the crucial part also, because sometimes we have the data, but that data sometimes it is not related to the problem statement, or it may be related to the problem statement a little bit, but you cannot use that data to actually produce or to process it to produce information. So that's why we need to identify how good is the data. And then we have to investigate how the data can be related to the stated goal. This is also another crucial phase, which sometimes we have data, but we don't know whether that data is it suitable or not if we want to perform analysis towards the goal. Okay, next phase is to clean the data. So this is actually tedious work, okay, which sometimes data can be misspelled, okay, like for example, like country, Malaysia, sometimes they have uppercase Malaysia, sometimes they have lowercase, sometimes they have Malaysia in full word, sometimes they just have MSIA, okay. So these actually things that we have to look into. So that's why data cleaning is considered as the most tedious process in data science project. Okay, in the exploration also we can do data visualization. So the purpose is to see the bird's eye view of the data. So we can see the pattern, the initial pattern of the data and the uniqueness of the data. So this one you can use tools like Tableau, Power BI, Orange, or even you can use Excel to actually see the data after you clean, and then you want to see how good is the data and how good is the pattern that you can actually extract from that particular data set. Okay, the next phase is to strengthen the data set. Okay, so strengthening is about the manipulating the data set to get the best value out of it. Okay, so we have the data, so how to enhance the data set? So firstly, usually we combine data from different sources. So let's say, for example, we have few sources from one agency, and we need to we have another data source for another agency. So we have two sets of data. So in order to create a story, so maybe you need to join these two particular data to become one. So how are you going to combine it? That is depends on how are you going to interpret the data. So you must have that kind of knowledge, which you can actually sort it by according to the time frame, or you can also sort it depending on the place or location. It depends. Okay, and then what we need to do is dimension reduction, because sometimes data, it can be huge. Okay, so we need to come up with a solution how to reduce the data. So usually we can use a PCA, which is a principal component analysis, or LDA, linear discriminant analysis, or backward future elimination, forward future construction, etc. Okay, sometimes data also can contain missing value, which can also influence the dimension of the data. So maybe you can think of how can we actually remove that particular missing data, and whether can it actually influence the pattern of the data. Okay, of course, the next thing is to avoid bias. Okay, so when we are dealing with data set, okay, sometimes when we are insert data or delete data, it can produce bias. So this, it can influence the end result. So because when you create bias, it can create the imbalance. Okay, it will create the imbalanced data set. So once imbalanced data set is appeared, so the whole prediction process can become bad. Okay, so that's why we have to avoid the bias. So it is the best if, let's say, if you do the classification or prediction, it is good to have a good distribution of data. Good distribution, that means that every data, they have the same amount of positive and negative class. Okay, right. And then number 4, it is to actually choose among the best features. Because why? Because not all features are important, because sometimes we have a lot of data, and especially if we are dealing with map data, which is on the shape file, for example. Okay, if you look at the map data, there are a lot of particular information that sometimes is not important to us. So that's why you have to choose which one that is the best, and you are going to actually discard it. Okay, and it applies to other kind of data sets, because sometimes you have to find features. Okay, and then some of data, if there is no features or there is not important, we can discard it. Okay, we can discard the features, because having a lot of features, it can make our system to process longer. Okay, so we don't want that to happen. Okay, the next part, it is to actually to create model. Okay, it is to create model. So it is actually the process of transforming data input to output. Okay, so usually we can use various methods like statistical based or machine learning. So usually when it comes to a project, usually we always start with the simplest one first. Okay, we always start with the simplest one. And if let's say we are not satisfied with the simple one, then we can move to the more complicated one or more complex algorithm. So for example, for descriptive and diagnostic analytics, simple statistical method can be employed to display the information related to the problem. But for prediction or predictive analytics, so the easiest one we can employ is linear regression. Okay, linear regression. And if you want to go more advanced, you can move to the machine learning like neural network, SVM, decision tree, or whatever kind of algorithm you can use in order to produce a more you can apply to the more complicated data set. Okay, and then it is where you're going to split the data set. So let's say, for example, you're already we already wrangle all of the data. Okay, you have many data sources from different agencies. So then you merge all of that data. So after that, you have to split. Okay, you have to split the data between for training and testing, which is training is for train the data and testing is for the validation. So from there, you have to make sure that training and testing data set, it should be in the same amount of distribution. Okay, it should be in the same amount of distribution. If not, you have to come up with some sort of methods in order to make sure that they are almost the same. Because if let's say training is towards on the positive class, testing is towards on the negative class, it will give you bad impression. It will give you bad result in terms of prediction. Okay. All right. Then we perform validation and optimize. So this we perform validation. We can use metrics like accuracy, precision, and etc. And some companies or organization they use A and B testing in order to validate the experiment. So basically, the A and B testing is about you create two sets of variables or two sets of data, and then you compare which one that gives you the best result. So then you can use that particular method. So that's why for A and B testing is also involving with some sort of another skills that you have to learn along the way. Okay, right. Next part, it is about the reporting. Okay, reporting is just there are debates like what kind of report is it? Is it like documentation, or is it a dynamic report or just a static report? So for me, in my perspective, it can be both. Okay, it can be both. So basically, it is about the visualization output of the analysis from the raw data. So because sometimes data, you can just get the data and then you just display it to the system or in the BDA tools. Or you can also produce some sort of processing to the data and then you display it to the BDA tools. So it depends of how can you actually produce the output. Okay, so it can be in many forms, like many forms of graph, maps, widgets, plots, etc. So this one, I think all of you know what kind of report, what kind of things that it can be done in order to generate the report, so that it will be easy for policymakers or top people in the organization to actually make decisions to make decisions. Okay, next part, which is the create and maintain long-term data. So this process, it works along the way. So just now I've discussed about the data collection, I've discussed about the cleaning, strengthening the data, you create the model, okay? So basically all of this, okay, it works together with create a long-term data platform. Okay, so this is where the infrastructure team also going to play an important role while working with us. Okay, because as I mentioned, in the data science project, they involve two phases, which it is about the preliminary analysis, which is done by the data science. But they also need to look into on how in future the analysis could be done. So that's why they need to come up with an idea of how automation can be done in order the data can be produced to the platform. Okay, so first and foremost is actually to record the workflow of the analysis. So that's why sometimes documentation also is very important when you doing the work. So you have to do some sort of documentation so that it will be easy for the infrastructure team in order to develop the platform. So along the way of the analysis, workflow should be recorded. It is because the data scientist will not be available all the time after the project deployment. So after the project deployment, we need to actually know, we need to automate the first phase of our process towards the end. Okay, yeah, because we are not going to be there all the time after the project deployment. Okay, so in this process, we have to work with the infrastructure team on how to automate the data science process. So it involves from the cleaning, merging, and etc. So usually the job is started from the beginning of the project, okay, until the end. So that's why the infra team or the developer, they need to be there, in order to make sure that the BDA project it is sustainable. Okay, and then we also have to think about the data sources, data ingestion, data process, data warehouse, and analytics, analysis and analytics. So the infrastructure team, they need to identify the types of hardware, software, or services that is needed, ranging from these particular sources. Okay, so of course, in the data sources, the this infrastructure team need to know whether it is a relational database, flat file, or is it NoSQL, or is it going to use is using GraphDB, API, or web scraper, or etc. And then for data ingestion, maybe they have to think about the two types of data, which is a batch data, or is it a streaming data. Okay, so usually for the current technology, they are using streaming data, which we incorporate with the Apache Kafka as part of the data input. And then for the data process, we use it involves cleaning or data integration. So this one we can use on the Apache Flume, Talent, or Apache Flink. And then we have to think about the data warehouse, which is we need to think about the data lake or analytical DB or data mart. Okay, which we have all of the data. We need to dump it somewhere. Okay, we have to store it somewhere. So in big data technology nowadays, we create a data lake so that every data that is entered to the system, it will be stored into that particular data lake. And of course, when we are playing with sensor data, it can be huge. It can be huge because sometimes the data can be recorded in every second. Okay, so that's why we need to have a good capability of data warehouse. And then for the analysis analytics, this one we can be in BI, which we can use the Tableau, Power BI, or Pentaho. Or for charting, we can use Google Maps or HiCharts or Mapbox or whatsoever. And then for analytics, we can use the R or Python. Okay, so this is the how can we create a long-term data platform. And this one we have to work together with the infrastructure team and also with the